tuning into BaisWave.
Hello there, I'm Flavia.
And I'm Filip.
And you're listening to BaisWave, a podcast by Basis. As some of you might know, national elections will be held this 29th of October.
And despite the fact that most of us international students can't vote, it is still something that should concern us. The results of these elections will affect university fundings and budget cuts that can determine the future of our programs for the better or worse.
Moreover, they also affect housing policies such as rent laws. It's important to keep up with Dutch politics since they can and will shape the way we live here in the Netherlands, our future and our education here at Leiden University. That is why we decided to make a crash course on the basic and most important things about Dutch politics. We will provide you information on some of the parties that are polling the highest lately, their programs, and what they have to say about the most contested issues here in the Netherlands. Before we talk about the upcoming elections, let's give you a quick refresher on the last election. The October 2023 general election was called after the collapse of the Rutte cabinet in July over immigration policies. The result of that election saw the PVV, under Geert Wilders, become the largest party in the House of Representatives for the first time since its founding. However, Wilders was initially unable to find parties to enter into a coalition with him due to disagreements with the PVV's more extreme demands outlined in its 10-point plan. Some of these policies included the deportation of thousands of Syrian migrants, freezing all requests for asylum, and further restrictions on immigration.
Largely due to these policies, most parties were unwilling to govern with Wilders, especially should he become prime minister. After 6 months of coalition talks, the PVV and two smaller outsider parties, the NSC or New Social Contract and BaisWave or the Farmers' Party, formed the far-right government under independent Prime Minister Dick Schoof. However, only a year after forming the Schoof cabinet fell apart, after the PVV demanded changing the coalition agreement between the parties to allow the government to exclude more asylum seekers than agreed. In June of this year, the PVV themselves left the coalition in protest, leaving the Schoof cabinet 49 members short of the 76-member majority needed to govern. Prime Minister Schoof formally dissolved the cabinet and called for a snap election to be held late this October.
For this election's refresher, we'll start off by covering the programs of each of the largest parties in Dutch politics.
The PVV, led by Geert Wilders, is currently the highest polling party in the upcoming elections at 20%. To provide some brief context for the party, Geert Wilders left the center-right VVD party in 2004, before the 2006 elections. Wilders founded the PVV, or Party for Freedom, to create a further right alternative to the establishment parties in Dutch politics. Since 2006, the PVV has grown in popularity, largely thanks to its stance on immigration. Mainly because its views on immigration and outwardly xenophobic rhetoric, the PVV has been called a far-right populist party. Geert Wilders has grown the party mostly around the issues of immigration, multiculturalism, and anti-Islam sentiment. Since 2020, the PVV has steadily grown in support, achieving its greatest electoral victory to date in 2023, where the party won the largest share of votes, finishing in first place. Despite their support decreasing since its all-time high in 2023 and 2024, the PVV still remains the most popular party in polls.
The PVV, despite being labeled as far-right or even radical right, does not neatly fit into the traditional left-right spectrum of politics. On issues of culture and immigration, the PVV is further right than any of the other establishment parties. The PVV election manifesto argues for a full halt to granting asylum, harsher punishment or denaturalization for crimes committed by migrants, ban in Islamic schools, the return of all Syrian migrants to Syria or other Arab countries, and the deportation of all adult male Ukrainian refugees. On foreign policy, the PVV has argued for the end of all EU accession negotiations, meaning a halt on EU expansion, moving its embassy in Israel to Jerusalem, continuing unlimited arms sales to Israel, withdrawal from the International Criminal Court, the European Convention on Human Rights, and the UN Refugee Convention.
However, on the topic of healthcare, the PVV has radically shifted in its position over the years. Beginning in 2010, the previously free market position of the PVV on the topic of healthcare as a costly and overinflated welfare system has shifted to embracing it. Wilders praises the healthcare system as a point of Dutch national pride. Wilders and the PVV have repeatedly argued that although the system should remain or even expand, it should work on a Dutch-first principle, meaning healthcare for Dutch citizens, not migrants. This strategy has proven to be massively popular with Dutch voters. GroenLinks PvdA is tied, polling for second place at 16% of the popular vote. The GroenLinks PvdA is a political alliance between two parties, GroenLinks, or the Green Left, and the PvdA, or the Labour Party, and is led by former Vice President of the European Commission and ex-Minister of Foreign Affairs, Frans Timmermans. It was founded at the national level during the 2021-2022 Dutch cabinet formation. In the 2023 Dutch general election, the GroenLinks PvdA was the second most voted party after the PVV, with 15.75% of votes and 25 seats in the House of Representatives. Seeing this with the current prediction polls, the public support for this party is steady. Ideologically, GroenLinks PvdA combines social democratic and green left principles, advocating for social justice, climate change, and a fairer distribution of wealth.
To address the housing shortage, the Alliance plans to build 100,000 high-quality, affordable homes to reduce vacancy and protect tenants. GroenLinks PvdA further advocates for climate policies such as supporting sustainable agriculture, ending fossil fuel subsidies, and decreasing existing nitrogen emission caps. The Alliance proposes to increase taxes on wealth and lower taxes on income to address income inequality. Furthermore, they plan on increases to public spending such as raising wages for healthcare workers, further investments in public transportation and education. On foreign policy, they advocate for the investment in a strong military, funded by higher taxes on the wealthy and international cooperation with European partners in supporting Ukraine. They also support the recognition of a Palestinian state and supports a lasting ceasefire agreement with sanctions on Israel. On issues such as immigration, its manifesto calls for an asylum policy with faster procedures, the protection for refugees, and the guarantee that labor migration serves the Dutch economy rather than enabling exploitation. They want to do this by phasing out exploitative farm labor migration and creating licenses for employment agencies. They also oppose the criminalization of undocumented migrants and seek to extend the special status of Ukrainian refugees.
The TDA is currently tied with the Alliance for second place at 16% of the popular vote. This is a notable increase in popularity after only winning 5 seats in the last election. The TDA, or Christian Democratic Appeal, can best be described as a traditional center-right party. Part of its polling success can be explained through the charismatic leadership of the new party head, Henrik Bontebal. A large part of their rhetoric this election focusing on renewing hope and returning decency to Dutch politics. Their party program this election is a traditional centrist approach to both domestic and foreign politics. One of their flagship policies is a proposed change to the Dutch electoral system where Senate elections will be called every 3 years and members of the Senate would serve 6-year terms.
On healthcare, the CDA takes an overall policy of reforming and strengthening the existing system. The CDA proposes reforming the Participation Act, meaning more benefits to caregivers as well as abolishing fines for adults who share a home. The CDA also calls for holding rejected asylum seekers criminally liable and migrants with resident permits to begin integration through taking Dutch language courses or face losing their residency. On foreign policy, the CDA has oriented itself as firmly pro-European, calling for further cooperation with European allies and even continuing negotiations on enlarging the EU in the future. They have called for an increased research and development budget, higher defense spending, and closer cooperation with European partners on security. D66, or the Democrat 66 Party, is a social liberal center-left party. Since its founding in 1966, the party has presented itself as a party which aims to further democratize Dutch politics. Since the collapse of the last coalition government, D66 has slowly been gaining in popularity, even overtaking the VVD in some polls. The party leader, Rob Jetten, has steered the party in a traditional center-right direction for this election. The D66 manifesto mostly focuses around education, housing, and political reform.
D66 calls for reforms to be made to the Dutch political system in order to further democratize it. Some of these policies include further empowering constitutional judges, lowering the voting age to 16, and to reform the parliament, increasing the seats in the second chamber from 150 to 260 representatives. On education, D66 wants to implement a policy they call tailor-made education, where students are allowed to have more control over which course they take. One of the more ambitious policies of the D66 in this election is their 10-city plan, a proposal to build 10 so-called future-proof cities to address the housing shortage. These cities, according to D66, would be a mix of urban development and sustainable green areas in the Randstad area between Amsterdam, Utrecht, Rotterdam, and The Hague.
The VVD, or the People's Party for Freedom, spent 12 years in power under Prime Minister Mark Rutte. However, since their electoral defeat in 2023, the party has steadily declined in popularity. The VVD is currently polling the lowest it has since 1971, at only 9% of the popular vote. The new leader of the VVD, former Justice Minister Dylan Jeziges, has shifted the party from its traditionally liberal stance even further to the right. Jeziges is a controversial figure both inside and outside of the party, and recent polls show that she remains the least popular leader of any of the major parties this election.
Though the VVD traditionally presents itself as a socially liberal but fiscally conservative party under the leadership of Rutte and later Jeziges, the party has consistently shifted further and further right. A controversial part of this rightward shift was the decision to enter coalition talks with the PVV after the 2023 elections. Although the VVD eventually backed out of the coalition talks, many voters and party members felt betrayed by entering negotiations with the Dutch far right. Since then, the VVD has claimed that it would not govern with the PVV. The VVD has taken a business-friendly stance in this election. They call for the decoupling of social assistance from the minimum wage and to further invest into business to support the economy. The VVD also supports the Netherlands in reaching the 3.5% of GDP goal that NATO outlined this year in the Hague Summit, meaning more defense spending. The VVD wants to have a stronger grip on migration, making stricter policies for who gets to stay in the Netherlands and a bigger focus on integration of migrants. Furthermore, the VVD calls for strengthening of the police force and for downsizing the role of government, giving more room for private businesses.
This election will decide the next several years of Dutch politics and whether the Netherlands continues to be ruled by newcomer outsider parties or by the traditional establishment parties.
Whatever the outcome, a government seems unlikely to form from the get-go. Despite their popularity, the PVV is a divisive party, which will have trouble finding partners to govern with. The establishment parties, on the other hand, still vary wildly in their policies and will have to compromise if they want to govern effectively.
This script was written by Annika, Flavia and Filip.
We hope you liked listening to this refresher podcast by BaisWave.
Make sure to stay tuned for a follow-up episode in the future discussing the formation of the cabinet.
Thank you for listening.
We'll see you next time. Adios!